Let's, though, talk about our main subject today, the safety of kids online, and big changes, Ian, coming in terms of the law around this. How big a moment is this, do you think, for people who haven't been following it that closely?
This should be the biggest moment in online safety since social media has been invented. It's later this month that Ofcom will start enforcing the protection of children measures to make the internet safer. And I'm sure you're about to hear from Melanie how it will be revolutionary and things will change. The Ofcom PR is often spun such that it sounds like everything will change for the better in a matter of weeks. But I think it's quite clear that Ofcom as a regulator need to do more than just be good at spinning their PR. They need to act within the bounds of the Act to the strongest possible way. And they're not doing that. They're sitting in the middle, pushed on one side by families who've lost people like me and pushed on the other side by the power of the big tech platforms. And I also think it's really important that Melanie starts to talk back to government, because Ofcom is clear about where the Act is weak, and she needs to push back and communicate those weaknesses to the government so that we can make change where necessary.
OK, so there are plenty of dilemmas, aren't there, in all of this? I mean, Kay, we know how much this matters to the public, and we know from viewers every time we talk about this issue, lots of you get in touch, and please do the same today. But how tricky do you think this is for politicians and for regulators trying to grapple with not squeezing out all the excitement and opportunity of the internet, but also keeping people safe?
Yeah, but it's staggeringly difficult, isn't it, Laura? The fact is, technology is moving at such a pace. Whatever the law is saying now will undoubtedly be out of date. I mean, this was first talked about, mooted in 2019. We didn't really know about AI then, did we? No. Now, ChatGPT is something I use every single day, several times a day. So I don't envy what Melanie Dawes has to do. You know, it falls on her shoulders. It's a very challenging position, and I don't know what she's going to say. I'll be interested to see what she does have to say. And
we'll hear in a few minutes. Yeah. But Inaya, there is a potential downside, though, of course, isn't there? If you go too far, you can squeeze out freedom of speech. You can do too much.
Well, I think that's the worry for many free speech campaigners. Undoubtedly, I think, including myself, I have substantial concerns about the impact on young people and children. But as we saw when it comes to a platform like X/Twitter, the owners of the platform have radically different ideas about what is and isn't acceptable. Under Jack Dorsey, if you criticise the government strategy on COVID-19 or express gender-critical views on trans rights, you could be kicked off the platform. And now we have a situation under Elon Musk where almost anything goes, which has completely transformed the user experience. So what even the big tech platforms view as acceptable is completely different, and policing that is quite difficult.
Very difficult.
Talk
indeed.
about WhatsApp as well.
Well, and WhatsApp and encrypted messages. There's so much to ask Melanie Dawes about, but throughout this in the last couple of years, we've heard repeatedly in this studio that the heartbreak of the families where things have gone so wrong is so plain. 4 of them told us why they're suing TikTok, convinced their children's death was linked to their experiences on the site. Esther Jai told us how her daughter Brianna was caught up in the online world and her killers had watched violent content. Mariano Janin explained how his 14-year-old daughter Mia was bullied in an online group chat before taking her own life. After years, new online safety laws came into being in the autumn. Ofcom is the regulator with the job of making the tech platforms stick to those rules. In March, platforms had to start removing illegal content more quickly and reduce the risk of it appearing in the first place. And in a couple of weeks, tech platforms will have to carry out age checks to make sure under 18s don't see harmful material. So will it really make the world safer for kids online? Well, Dame Melanie's with us today, and welcome to the studio. It's good to have you with us. As Kay Burley said, there's so much on your shoulders. We know how much viewers care about this issue, and Ian Russell's just told us this should be the biggest moment for internet safety. But can you guarantee from later this month that children are going to be protected from seeing harmful content online?
Look, it is a really big moment because finally the laws are coming into force. And in fact, some of them are already in force, and we've already opened investigations into 11 companies that are not doing what we think they should be doing. What happens at the end of this month is that we see the wider protections for children come online. And so what we're expecting to see then is that any company that shows material that shouldn't be available to under 18s, pornography, suicide and self-harm material, that should be either removed from their service, or they're going to need highly effective age checks to screen out under 18s. There's a lot more than that, but this is a big moment. And we're already starting to see some change, but we're under no illusions at Ofcom about the really quite challenging path ahead.
How on earth is that actually going to work? So you can understand with a porn site that advertises itself that way, where there might be an age check that might already be there. But if it's about X or Instagram or Facebook and a 14-year-old goes online and sees something, how's it actually physically going to work to make sure they don't see harmful things? How are they going to check?
Well, look, first, just to say, porn companies don't have age checks at the moment, and that's what we're changing. We saw the biggest porn company in the world that owns Pornhub, which is a site that's widely used in the UK, announced a few weeks ago that they are going to follow Ofcom's rules. They haven't done that for any other jurisdiction.
But for those ordinary platforms that are in all our lives in such frequent ways, how on earth is it going to work?
Yeah, so look, there's going to be lots of different ways that companies can do this. So some companies will decide to go 18 plus only. But they'll need age checks to make sure that that really happens in practice. And some may put an age check around particular types of material like pornography or other adult content. What we've said to the industry is, you decide. We've set out about 5 or 6 things that we think can work, like the facial checks and using things where you've already been checked for your age, like credit cards or open banking. We've said you decide what works for your platform, but we will be checking whether it's effective, and those that don't put in those checks will hear from us with enforcement action. Isn't
the problem, though, as you've just said, you've said to the companies, you decide. And when you listen to campaigners like Ian, they don't want the companies to decide. They've seen how the companies have, in some cases, behaved in the last few years, and they think you should decide, and the government should decide, and they should say how this is going to happen, and you've given them the power to design the system themselves.
What we've said is that there are some things that work and some things that don't work. So there's no question of any company out there deciding whether or not to put in an age check if they've got adult material on their site. That is now absolutely required by law. We've already opened up enforcement action, Laura. I think it's important just to say, we mean business, and we've already demonstrated that.
But when it comes to harmful content, illegal stuff is against the law, and you've already changed the rules on that. But harmful content, whether that's about self-harm or young girls seeing material about eating disorders, or things that might be intimate images that aren't actually against the law, how are you going to make sure that these companies are just not showing these to young people? Because you're giving them a lot of power in how they do it.
No, we're not giving them that much power, actually. What I'm saying is that when they're putting in age checks, they need to work out what's going to work on their service. But let me be really clear what we are demanding to protect children, what does come in force at the end of this month. They're going to need to tame those algorithms so that not just porn, but suicide and self-harm material must not be shown, but also violent content, dangerous challenges, misogyny, all of that must not be fed actively to kids on their feeds. We've spoken a lot to children. I was with some teenagers earlier this week, and so we're also introducing requirements to make it a lot easier for kids to control what's going on for them online, not to be brought into really toxic chats that they then can't get out of.
But to be really clear for parents, though, you're not blocking that kind of material. You're not forcing them to block it or take it down. And campaigners...
Can I just say, they must not show that to children. And we are going to be testing this. So it isn't the case that they'll have choice over whether or not children are able to see this kind of content in future. The law is very clear on some types of material in particular, and Ofcom's codes are very clear. These algorithms have got to change very significantly in order to meet our rules.
But there are significant worries among campaigners and experts, and even some people in law enforcement, about what is also not covered by the new codes. The rules don't cover messaging apps like WhatsApp, for example.
They do, actually. They do.
But they don't cover encrypted messaging in the way that, what's to stop in the rules, what's to stop intimate pictures flying around a playground on everybody's smartphone?
So look, if you're using platforms where it isn't encrypted, and Snapchat, for example, is not encrypted, then absolutely messaging should be properly quality controlled by the platforms. And I should say, by the way, you said earlier that intimate images are allowed. They're not. Actually, intimate image abuse and the sharing of illegal images that have been procured without consent, shared without consent, that's illegal for adults as well as for children. So I think maybe some of this is more covered than perhaps some people are realising.
But the issue comes back to again and again, though, is not material that's illegal. It's about things that might be harmful for people to see. And the rules, as we understand it, don't block dangerous or risky challenges. Now, the families suing TikTok believe that risky challenges that their children got involved with contributed to leading to their deaths. Why don't the new rules block dangerous or risky challenges?
So dangerous challenges where children are being encouraged to do something that's really risky to them, and as you say, in some cases has meant that some children have lost their lives as a result of that. That is covered by our rules. We say that violent content, misogyny, and dangerous challenges must not be pushed towards kids in their feeds.
But that's different to blocking it. So why aren't they blocked altogether so that parents can be completely confident kids just won't see those things?
Well, so what the law says, what Parliament decided was that there should be an absolute block on suicide and self-harm material and pornography for under 18s. And then what we've done is also add to that other types of content that we think is really harmful for children. And it's because we've listened to parents about this, by the way, that we've got that comprehensive picture. That must not be pushed actively in the feeds, because it's the virality of these algorithms that means that children say they lose control very quickly about what's going on. And look, we are going to be testing this. We're going to be looking at this at Ofcom, and I want campaigners and experts, we're going to be talking to children a lot over the next few months to find out whether what the platforms say they're going to do will actually become a reality, because we've had 20 years when this hasn't happened, and there's a big cultural change that we're trying to push across Silicon Valley, frankly.
And it is a huge job. I mean, do you see yourself then as being in opposition to Silicon Valley? You're trying to make them change?
We are trying to make them change. And, you know, I think it is a very big moment for the industry, a very serious moment. And the reason why people are making changes, though, is because they've seen that Ofcom's ready to enforce. That's where we prioritise that in the spring and have opened up really quite a lot of investigations already. So, you know, there'll be more to come.
But there are serious concerns, though, about some other loopholes, and I just briefly do want to go through some of them, because the rules also don't fully cover chatbots. Now, there's a big survey out this morning suggests that kids are spending more and more time on these kinds of AI-generated apps. And it's really serious. It's not just about protecting children. The government's terrorism czar, Jonathan Hall, has also warned that there is a loophole here where malign individuals might use chatbots. Do you accept that there's a big gap in your rules because it doesn't fully cover AI?
So look, there are some forms of new AI which are going to be covered, but there are some that may not. And I think this is a general point here, that as the internet keeps changing, as new forms of AI come in very rapidly, there may need to be some changes to the legislation to cover that.
So there may have to be more laws.
Meanwhile, we are clear that a chatbot on, say, Snapchat or Instagram is covered by the rules, because essentially if they're engaging with a young person or an adult, that's caught just in the same way as if a human being was doing it.
But a senior committee of MPs has warned just this week there's another very serious loophole when it comes to misinformation. So the Technology Committee just looked at what happened around the riots after the Southport tragedy, and they judged that by not covering misinformation, and I want to quote this from the committee because it's very strong, they said the Act fails to keep UK citizens safe from a core and pervasive online harm.
Yeah.
Don't politicians have to get on with it and give you the power to crack down on misinformation as well?
Well, look, my job is to implement the rules that Parliament's already given us to protect us from illegal harm and these wider protections
But as the regulator, you have a very powerful voice in the industry and you can send signals. You don't have to wait for legislation. You could signal right here, right now, today, that you think some of these things are not acceptable.
Look, I'm not a politician, and I think it's incredibly important that Ofcom respects the role that we have, which is to implement the laws that we've been given. If Parliament decides to widen those towards mis and disinformation or wider issues around addiction for kids, for example, then of course Ofcom stands ready to implement that. But I think it's very important that we focus on the job we've been given.
But for people to have confidence in Ofcom as a regulator, you know, there are holes in this. You might think there are holes a bit like Swiss cheese in these rules and regulations. If you want people watching today to have confidence as a regulator, how can they when there are so many loopholes?
I think what people, I hope, will see and get more confident about in the coming months is that we're starting to drive change in the things I think many parents and young people watching now do really care about, which is these algorithms being tamed, children not being able to get onto porn sites, stumble across pornography at very young ages, 8, 9, 10 years old. That's been normalised over the last 20 years. And it really, really matters. And that's what we're really driving at the moment.
OK, well, it's great to have you with us this morning at what is a big moment. And it'd be great to have you back in a few months once people have got more of an idea about whether or not the new system is working. I do want to briefly ask you about the BBC, because Ofcom has authority over the broadcasters and the BBC. You said the organisation has questions to answer over its Glastonbury coverage and the broadcast of some of Bob Vylan, a band. You can see a picture of them here. They're anti-Israeli chants. Some senior BBC staff have stepped back from their roles, but are you satisfied with the explanations you've been given?
Well, look, I think it's very frustrating that the BBC has had some own goals in this area with the Gaza documentary and then with the Glastonbury coverage. And, you know, it does start to erode public trust and confidence. I think I would say that above all, what frustrates me and others is that when these things go wrong, it can take a long time for the BBC to see that something's happened when everybody else was there, you know, within a matter of hours. So I would say to the BBC, I think they need to get a grip quicker, get these reports and investigations concluded sooner. Otherwise, there is a real risk of a sort of loss of confidence in the BBC, which is a shame because, you know, what the BBC does day by day is bring some really high-quality journalism to our screens and to the radio, which is what we need.
Do you have faith in the BBC leadership to get a grip?
Well, look, I think it's a tough job to be at the top of the BBC. I think the board and the senior team at the BBC, you know, need to, as I said, get a bit quicker actually at recognising when something's gone wrong, and you know, get a grip of the actions that they need to take. Or there is going to be, you know, a real risk that the BBC loses confidence in what it delivers for the public.
But I just wonder if you have faith that they will.
Well, look, we're going to have to see over the next week. I think we're expecting the Gaza report early in the coming week. We've asked a lot of questions about the Glastonbury coverage. The BBC's got a lot on its plate that it needs to address. I think it is important to also recognise that they do deliver a very high-quality job for the public, usually, but it's these own goals that are very frustrating, which they need to be quicker to get onto, quicker to grip, and quicker to put right.
OK, Dame Melanie, thanks so much for coming in. It's great to have you with us. And as I say, it would be great to have you back in a few months once we've got a handle on the new online safety system. We know how much our viewers care about this issue. Thanks so much for your time.